Welcome to Melt. I'm Suresh Venkat. Last month, global communications firm Edelman launched the 2022 edition of its annual Trust Barometer report. This year, the focus is on Gen Z and why brands and businesses must take note. To know more, Melt was in conversation with Richard Edelman, CEO of Edelman. Recorded in Cannes, France, this conversation also explores the evolving role of PR and the communications business. So let's get ready to melt with Richard Edelman. The big insight from Edelman's Trust Barometer this year is consumers, especially Gen Z consumers, deeply care about what brands stand for in terms of their values and their actions. What does this now mean for brands that cater especially to the Gen Z market?
So Gen Z has an amazing gravitational pull. It's not just selling to them, it's also selling to the 25 to 65s who look at what Gen Z is doing in music or art or culture or products, and they say, I want to follow that kid because he or she actually knows better than me, because they're dominant on social media, because they're also deeply interested in politics or societal. 70% of Gen Z say that they care about societal issues and are actively involved in them. So I think the idea for brands is actually don't do things that are just image. You have to act. You have to work on the major issues, whether it's sustainability or training or wage levels or now even geopolitics. So brands have to play a central role in improving the society. So example, Dove has the campaign for Real Beauty about female self-image. That campaign's been going for 15 years, but they now every year restore it and make young people feel really strong about how they perceive themselves.
And the Trust Barometer also says that Gen Z seems to trust brands more than countries or NGOs or other actors in this. So here's my question to you. With the environmental movement, we had a few brands faking their way through it, or greenwashing as it was called. With this now, what shall we call this? The cause movement or the purpose movement. Are brands likely to fake it as well here?
I just don't think you can fake it anymore, Suresh. I think it's really clear that the smart brand will act before making claims. And the ones that actually are smart, example, Unilever is trying to sell strips of detergent or whatever, as opposed to a full bottle of detergent. So the challenge is going to be to prove value to the consumer who says, well, why is this strips? These just look like strips. But if we can make the math for the consumer and say, saving on shipping, saving on your own having to carry so much weight back and forth to the supermarket. We have to give the idea to the consumer that you get value in a different way than quantity, that in fact value is conveyed through delivery of service. Mm-hmm. And we even have a program for National Grid in the UK where a green light comes on in your house if you're on renewables. Mm-hmm. Because the grid sometimes is powered by renewables, sometimes by other. So we have to give those signals to the consumer.
Richard, you've advised both countries and companies.
Including your country.
That is true, including India. What's the difference in these two kinds of clients, countries versus companies?
Countries move more slowly. Countries have big initiatives. They have the politics. I think it's the difference between business and government. But I would say, and just as to the India moment, there's never been a better time for India to focus attention on its ability to do manufacturing, on its obvious advantage in software and tech, but also the rising young people and the number of young who actually will have money, the rising middle class, because people are really reconsidering having so much manufacturing in one country.
Mm-hmm. So is that what Brand India should stand for in the coming decade?
Brand India has to be much more than just the software genius for the world, mm-hmm. That it can make great products. I know that you are now making not just motorcycles, but cars, and you also have a great steel business with Tata Steel, and you have a really important business in clothing. And, so I think India is the sort of great factory of the world, is a fantastic next positioning alongside the software.
Okay, let's talk about the PR industry as a whole. Ever since the days of Edward Bernays, PR has been seen as a profession of spin doctoring, and people usually put a spin on bad things. Where does the PR industry stand today?
So I want the PR industry to be seen as moving from defense to offense. that we are about changing people's behaviors. You know, when Paul Pullman stepped down from Unilever, he said, you know, we've done the easy 1/3, change the products. The hard 2/3 is changing the consumer behavior. That's where we come in and inspire change. And example, we did a program for Ajinomoto in the height of pandemic in the US when there was anti-Asian behavior. And we said, listen, go to Chinese restaurants, take out food, take out hate. And it was so important to support the Chinese entrepreneurs doing food with influencers. These people were, I don't know, 25, 30 years old and saying, you can't do without your dumplings. It's awesome. So I want PR image to not be about just spin doctoring. I want it to be about real change.
And speaking of going on the offense, advertising used to be the single biggest vehicle for a brand to carry its message. But many people, including me, we pay to avoid advertising, whether it's YouTube Premium or Netflix. In an ad-free world, is advertising now going to creep into ad-free services, streaming services, premium services?
Well, I think what you've seen in streaming services in the last 6 months is that they actually are going to have to incorporate advertising. Netflix and others have acknowledged that that's necessary. But I love this because it also means that we have got a freer field. Now, let's be frank. Our media universe is shrinking. The number of journalists, unfortunately, is diminished because the number of local newspapers, et cetera, is shrinking because of ad revenues. But we see go direct to the end user, go on social channels, set up a TikTok channel, set up, your own company's social, because we really have an opportunity to go first to the employees, but then to the consumers, listen to them, have a discussion, learn from them, and PR becomes a really important, not just supporting, supplemental, but a direct vehicle for marketers.
And how are technologies like Web3 and blockchain impacting the PR industry?
I think it's early yet. I think that, for example, we've now put a Pernod Ricard brand onto the metaverse. We had some fun with it. It's more experimental. I don't think we made a lot of money for the brand yet, but we're in the play.
And if you were a young man starting your PR career all over again today, what skills would you be learning?
The first is I would definitely serve outside the US. I would go to a market like India or Indonesia because the growth potential, it's still a young business. Second, I would be very conscious of being totally adept in digital. I can't just be a classic, creative or whatever. I have to be inherently social, putting up my material on Instagram or other as a person, and seeing what kind of audience I can build and what I can learn from that.
What about skills like data science? Do PR professionals, are they going to need more technological skills?
I'm glad you brought this because we have a whole set of trust tools that are going to be coming in September called Trust Stream that will enable a PR to say, listen, Suresh is interested in these kinds of stories, or the likelihood of his audience, if it's a woman, to be interested in this, here's the kind of thing. So in a certain way, to be more intelligent about proposing stories to you.
Richard, now PR sits, like you said, at the intersection of communications, advertising, marketing, and now technology. So in your view, where does the PR industry go from here?
I think that the PR industry in the next phase will have its own ideas, will have its own place in the strategy place, because the number of issues that companies have to deal with are well beyond what advertising traditionally does. So geopolitics, race, sustainability, reskilling, all of these play to us. And in the United States, even more than that, voting rights, gun rights, abortion. I mean, it's crazy time. So, but that level of fast response and also skills.
Companies around the world are grappling with ESG or environmental, social, and governance concerns. Many of them get environmental okay and governance okay, but with social, with things like gender fluidity, LGBTQ rights, these continue to flummox companies. How are you advising these businesses?
So I think the S is the weak link of companies so far. And so I'm married to a Latina, and she's advocating for more Hispanics in boards and in companies and training them and promoting them this. Because I think only 1% of total tech executives are Hispanic. That has to change. because it's,
And
20% of the population. So the S, we have to be intentional about going to schools, training them early, giving them the confidence, because, it's just like women don't go into tech as much because they, get turned off to science. That's crazy. We need the women. I look to companies to make that early investment, as opposed to just wait till they're 21 and done from college.
By fixing
it's
it
fixed already.
Yeah.
We've already said it. And we are trying to recruit now in America, for instance, at HBCUs, which is black colleges, because we don't have enough blacks in the business. So we've set up stuff at a couple of universities, Edelman Scholars.
You work on strategy for a whole host of clients, Richard. Is the PR industry itself in need of some strategic rethinking?
I think that Edelman has shown the way in the last 10 years about the possibility of having its own creative, its own data, its own digital, its own planning, its own experiential, et cetera. So as opposed to being in a holding company with different verticals, ours is an integrated approach. It's and it helps that we're a family business.
Are you then competing with big consulting, big advertising, big
Yes.
creative? You are in the same arena as them?
Yes, we may be David versus Goliath, but we're in there with our stones throwing very well.
All right, let me ask you a couple of questions about Edelman itself. You've resisted being taken over and bought out by big agencies for how many years now?
Well, 70.
Why?
Because we're better off being by ourselves. And neither my father nor I really care about the money. We like to win. And so my late father never wanted to sell, and me either. And I have 3 daughters now in Edelman, and they're all very well educated, and they're coming up, and they're saying, "Dad, how long you want to be around?" No, I'm kidding. I'm here for a long time.
All right. So 2022 marks the 70th year of Edelman, and it's the 26th year as CEO for you. And you have 6,000 employees, and you said you don't care about money. You do make $1 billion in revenue, right? What gets you to work every day, Richard, after 26 years at the top?
I love competing. I love the game. I love thinking about also helping clients. Example, I work on Unilever a lot, and in the height of the pandemic, I said to the head of the U.S. business, what if we did something crazy, like have a day of service, and all the products from Unilever in the U.S. are donated to relief of the people who are in trouble in the pandemic. He said, that's a completely crazy idea. I said, well, we should do it for 8 weeks from now. He said, okay, let's do it.
All right.
That's what gets me out of bed in the morning.
And pulling off the crazy idea?
Pulling the crazy ideas, and but also doing something that's substantial.
Let me ask you a personal question now. Growing up, you wanted to be either a businessman or a politician, if I'm right? Does being the head of a global PR company fulfill both those desires in one form or the other?
Well, to be on the stage with Garry Kasparov and be able to propose a campaign like Regain Ukraine. Mm-hmm. What a great privilege to be able to help a country come out of this horrible war. And yeah, I do think about, should I have been an elected official, but I actually think I can get more done this way.
All right, Richard, final question. India is obviously a complex market, hundreds of different languages and cultures. How does a company like Edelman, what's the secret to navigating India?
So we have a great leader, Rakesh, who's been with us for a decade. Number 2, we have to have a diverse business. Our biggest growth last year was in digital. Rakesh has always been great in corporate. We've also been important in consumer marketing historically. But now we have digital wing. And I think, again, we are going to over-index India because we think it's the growth market of Asia. Given the issues between the US and China, it's the third way.
And when do we see you in India?
This fall. Count me in.
All right, we will see you there.
I'm
Richard.
looking forward.
Richard Edelman, thank you for talking to us at Melt.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, one of the big talking points at the Cannes Lion Festival last month was the ongoing war in Ukraine. In fact, on the very first day of the festival, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky sent a video message calling for the help of delegates and global creative communications professionals. Let's first take a look at the speech, followed by a video of the impact of the war on Ukraine's creative industry.
Greetings from Ukraine, Cannes Lions. These days I was on the front line. Our brave soldiers, our brave defenders are fighting back against the Russian army. 117 days ago, everything changed for Ukraine. We are defending against a nuclear state that has unlimited access to money and has disregarded any limits on violence. I'll be honest with you, the end of this war and its circumstances depend on the world's attention. And that's why I need allies. We need people like you. You are the most creative people in the world, always on the cutting edge, whether it's the refugee flag or the fearless girl, the ice bucket challenge or the rivers of light. Every time you find words and images to reach the depths of the human soul, you make people talk about issues everyone would otherwise overlook. I'm sure that you will do a lot more to promote Ukrainian bravery. Your campaigns and your work will make our fight for freedom legendary, because we are fighting not only for our own freedom, but for the freedom of the entire democratic world, for all of those who cannot even imagine the extent of tyranny and censorship that exists in Russia. Now you can bring peace to Europe simply by applying your professional qualities. I believe that the power of human creativity is greater than the power of nuclear state that is stuck in the past. Speak of Ukraine. Don't let the world switch to something else. The world must remember that Ukraine is fighting for freedom. This fight must end in our victory as soon as possible. Your every success will mean saving thousands of lives. Thank you. Glory to Ukraine.
What were Ukrainian creatives doing before the war? Filming good ads in cinema, creating innovative and cultural projects, being cosmopolitan and sincere. We lived happy lives. And dreamed of going up on the stage of the Cannes Festival one day. So we worked on it, delivering within the deadlines. But once, a deadline literally turned into the deadline for us. On February 24th, we woke up in the midst of war. Waking up has felt as if it was February 24th again and again ever since. Even when we didn't sleep at all. We had to learn new professions overnight.
Я хочу, щоб мої діти жили у вільній країні, в якій поважають людську гідність.
We learned how to sew bulletproof vests fast, find necessary medicines in a matter of hours, and cook 1,000 meals a day. We joined rallies in Berlin.
To ask NATO to close the sky over Ukraine.
Organize events in the biggest European cities. Meet Ukrainians at the borders. Travel through 5 countries. We joined brainstorming from the train, the training camp, the hostel in Stockholm. Because our ideas still remain our most powerful weapon. No matter what, we learn to adapt.
Основная идея, что хотим завладеть словом смелость.
And as long as the world is in danger, we will shoot without creativity. Join us. Good thing you don't have to change your job for it. Slava Ukraini.
That video set the tone for many sessions at the festival, including the one conducted by Edelman. The session brought Russian exile and chess player Garry Kasparov on stage, who, along with Richard Edelman, announced an initiative called Regain Ukraine, aimed at ramping up pressure on politicians to bring the war to an end. Here's Richard Edelman on what that initiative entails and what brands can learn from Zelensky. Richard, the conversations at Cannes Lion this year have been dominated by the Russia-Ukraine war. In your view, is Ukraine winning the war of perception in this war?
I think President Zelensky is a model of communication. He's got his green T-shirt. He's talking very frequently. And he's very consistent in his messaging, which is that Ukraine doesn't want to give up any territory, that the West has to support him with arms and money, and that his people are totally behind the fight.
And he was a speaker at this year's Cannes as well, virtually. What can brands learn from President Zelensky?
So, in fact, I was on the stage with Gary Kasparov as the first speaker, and Kasparov had the foreign minister speak as well, and Zelensky spoke just after. And they want to move the conversation to a notion called Regain Ukraine, which is to rebuild the infrastructure, to rebuild the country's physical and mental health, to restore their cultural landmarks, that there will be a period after a war, as if post-war Europe, and that they need the help of the world to make this a great country again.
And can brands contribute in ways to this?
I think that brands play a very fundamental role in this. I think that in the first phase, somehow any action that is courageous should be seen in the context of Ukraine. You know, there was a wonderful photo Kasparov showed of a young girl, beautiful girl in a red dress standing at her bombed out school. And that's courage. And it could be for L'Oreal or Chanel or something like this. Brands need somehow to contribute, maybe also through cause-related marketing, to the Odessa Opera House or other cultural institutions.
Now, let's move to creative picks, where we'll take a look at the Grand Prix winning entry for the PR Lions this year. The campaign, the Breakaway, was a virtual cycling activation that reconnected a group of Belgian prisoners with the outside world. Made for sports retailer Decathlon, the campaign resulted in around $1.4 million of earned media. Conceptualized by BBDO Belgium, the campaign also opened up a national conversation about the role of prisons in the justice system. Take a look.
Meestal krijg je dan te horen, die veranderen toch nooit niet, laten we dan maar gewoon zitten. Misschien omdat we een fout maken dat we niet kunnen veranderen, dat we niet geen mensen meer zijn.
Daar is een wielerploeg opgericht met 6 gedetineerden. Ze rijden op rollen op het virtuele platform Zwift.
As a retailer who makes sport accessible, Decathlon gave 6 prison inmates the chance to become the first e-cycling team for prisoners.
Dat is een mijlpaal, hè? Dat online is in de gevangenis.
Racing with people from the outside world on Zwift, as anonymous athletes instead of outcasts.
In dat programma zitten er ook aan de andere kant andere mensen ook op een fiets te fietsen, gelijk ik.
We put their schedules online so the Zwift community could join their rides.
Ik heb wel Zuid-Amerikanen tegengekomen, Chinezen, Britten, tot van overal eigenlijk.
Reconnecting them with society from behind bars.
When I heard about this initiative, I was just like, I need to ride with these guys.
A podcast documented the impact on their mental health.
Van het moment dat ik qua verzuring en zo had in mijn benen, en dan begon ik mij te motiveren, dat was heel mooi, dat was ja.
Showing the real power of a virtual sport.
De minister van Justitie en 5 kompanen die het gaan opnemen tegen 6 gevangenen die ook thuis rijden hun tijdelijke woonplaats hopelijk.
Het maakt deel uit van datgene waar ik echt wel op inzet en dat is zinvolle detentie.
That's a wrap on this episode. You can follow Melt on social media. The handle is Ready to Melt, or simply log on to readytomelt.com. And if you'd like to follow me, it's @Suvenk on Twitter. Till next week, goodbye and thanks for watching.